On a remote mountain village, a series of animal carcasses suddenly turn up overnight and appear to have been demolished by an unknown source. Inugami, a detective specializing in these type of events, is called out from Tokyo to investigate these disasters. After, we see a group of boys in the village who are excited when hearing about the detective coming all the way from Tokyo and arriving in their town. In the group, we see a boy named Yataro Kusaka, who one day wants to visit Tokyo and become a detective himself. His friends beg him to let them come by later to see the man from Tokyo, and he agrees as long as they don't disturb the guests. Yataro then starts making fun of a strange-looking boy called Kabane, who is Yataro's cousin and lives with them. Yataro tells him to stay outside once he arrives as he always smells. Meanwhile, the detective Inugami is seen on the side of the road with a flat tire. Later on, Mrs. Kusaka, Yataro's mother and Inugami's client, appears on the road and offers to give him a ride to their home, which is where he'll be staying for the time being. They talk about the animal bodies which are happening out of nowhere and asks to keep this investigation a secret from the kids as they might be frightened about these events. The detective agrees and said he will do everything he can to keep the peace in the village. At the villa, Inugami sees Kabane working in the fields and greets him. However, Kabane doesn't say a word and just bows, making Inugami believe he's shy or perhaps a hard worker who doesn't want to be disturbed. That night, Inugami is relaxing in the hot springs and Yataro comes in and offers to wash his back. Inugami then asks Yataro about the boy he saw in the fields. Yataro tells him he's called Kabane, also known as Dorotabo, nicknamed after a yokai, and he always works outside in the fields. Apparently, Kabane was born with a very bad smell, so no one will ever approach him or want to talk with him. He's also been abandoned by his parents, and ever since then, Yataro's mother took him in. After his bath, the detective asks Mrs. Kusaka that he no longer wants her son Yataro to serve him, and requests for Kabane to attend to him instead. In the morning, Kabane makes coffee for Inugami, and after talking for a little, Inugami asks the boy if he had seen anything strange recently, as he knows Kabane is always out late working on the fields. Kabane reveals to Inugami that he knows about the dead animals which have appeared recently, and that he's actually the one who has to get rid of the corpses. He explains to Inugami that these events normally happen on the night of the new moon, and that the next new moon will be in 5 days, so that will most likely be the next event. After, they both wait for the next new moon, and during these days the detective spends most of his time helping Kabane with his daily chores. Until one day, Inugami notices a necklace on Kabane and asks him what it was. Kabane tells Inugami he doesn't know what it is, but he's had this necklace on him ever since he was born, and it most likely belonged to his parents. He explains that he was probably abandoned by them, but he's been carrying this stone his whole life. However, Inugami recognizes the symbol on the stone and told Kabane that he is incorrect about what this stone is and tells him it's called the life stone. He told the boy that this stone has a special component in it, which can only form under special circumstances. As it's so precious, his parents wouldn't have left it on him without reason, meaning that he wasn't actually abandoned. The detective goes on to ask Kabane if he would like to meet his parents one day, and thinks he might be able to track them down if he wishes. On the night of the new moon, Kabane is waiting outside for Inugami, but he's then confronted by Yataro, who's jealous of the attention he's receiving from the detective, and begins to shout at Kabane, saying he's not special and that he only wants to ruin his chance to go to Tokyo. While enraged, Yataro rips off Kabane's necklace, causing the boy to turn into a demon monster. Yataro sees his transformation and quickly ran away screaming. But luckily, while in the demon form, he managed to pick up the necklace and he returns to normal. After realizing what he had done, Kabane is upset and is seen crying near the barn. He thinks it's all his fault for the recent animals dying, until Inugami found him and then shows him his tail on his back. He explains to Kabane that kimonos have existed in the human world for a very long time, which are rare beings who live among humans, but must go undetected by them at all times. He tells Kabane that he's a hybrid between a human and yokai, and that the stone is important to him, as it allows him to stay in his human form and stops his thirst from attacking the humans. He also adds that there is another culprit out there who was committing these crimes. Knowing that Kabane is not to blame, Kabane realizes that his cousin Yataro has fled into the forest, as he was scared when seeing Kabane turn into a demon, so they both went into the forest to find him. After finding him, Yataro is surrounded by transformed dogs, who are soon finished off by the duo. Moments after, they come across one of the culprits, a demonic moose, and without any delay it attacks them, but Kabane is also gifted with incredible strength and was able to defeat it with his bare hands. Inugami is impressed seeing this, but moments after, Inugami reveals that he was actually hired to finish him off, and he was lying to him, since Kabane was the main culprit, and Mrs. Kusaka knew what Kabane really was, since her sister told her when giving him away. The detective then shoots him in the head. After heading back to the village, Inugami tells Mrs. Kusaka he's finished the job, and then leaves while taking Kabane's body with him. Later on, Kabane regenerates his body and is alive again. Inugami explains that this was possible because he's half yokai and human. He then takes him to his office in Tokyo. Here, Kabane meets two other orphans, called Shiki and Akira. Inugami explains that he took them in, as they are also part of their race known as kimonos. He offers Kabane to stay here in Tokyo and work with them in the detective team, but tells him he doesn't have to answer right away. Akira then asks if Kabane is also a kimono like them, as he smells quite unusual. Inugami tells them that he is half kimono and human, so he's known as what's called a hanyo. But the yokai within him is so powerful, making him an immortal demon. But he has similarities to Shiki, as they are both hanios. Shiki doesn't like that they recruited a new person, and is furious that Kabane was wearing his clothes. He tells Kabane that he's 1 year older than him, making him his superior, then storms off to the bathroom. Later on, when Kabane goes to the bathroom, he trips on a wire, and Shiki appears asking why he came here. Kabane tells Shiki that Inugami is helping him find his parents, but Shiki laughs, saying that they're most likely dead or he was abandoned. Kabane tries to get up, but the string is attached to him, and Shiki warns him not to move, otherwise it will rip apart his leg. However, Kabane doesn't listen and frees himself, leaving a hole in his leg. Shiki asks if it hurts, but to his surprise Kabane was able to heal himself and regenerate the body part. The next day they head out on their first investigation task. When they arrive, the police explain that there's been a bug infestation which had attacked a family inside their home. Inugami explains that something inside the room was attracting the bugs, and unless they take it out, the bugs will never leave the room. Shiki tries to use his silk powers to produce webs, and tries to trap the creatures in the web. However, that's no use, as the bugs destroy the web by eating it. Before Inugami intervenes, Kabane volunteers to go inside. This leaves everyone in the room afraid, as he's only young. But Inugami agrees to this and remembers that he can survive, as Kabane can't produce blood or feel any pain. As soon as he enters, the bugs cover his entire body, but he doesn't feel a thing, and the animals can't feed on him, so he managed to find the object causing the bugs to infest the house. Inugami tells the boy who lives there that the bugs feed on the human emotion of guilt, and the object that attracts them was a pair of stolen shoes, which the boy's little brother had stolen for their mom because they're so poor. After, Kabane agrees to be a part of the team, and in exchange, Inugami will help him find his parents. Later on, we see the detective talking on the phone to a mysterious woman called Inari, who has a great influence with the Tokyo police. He tells Inari about Kabane and that he might be a possible threat. The next day, Inugami sends the boys over to the police station to meet with Inari. However, the officer doesn't believe that they would know Inari and stops them from going to see her. Suddenly, a girl appears named Kon, asking which one of them is Kabane, as Inari is waiting for him in her office. When Kabane meets Inari, she acts strange toward him and is only interested in Kabane's life stone. She explains that with this stone, kimonos as a race would no longer need to feed on the energies of humans to survive in this world, and told him she needs the stone to replicate it, while removing his head and putting it in a suitcase. Inari then orders Kon to finish off the other boys who are waiting outside. While outside, Kon has shapeshifted into Kabane, but she loses control when Shiki offends her master and reveals her real form of a Katsune and starts attacking them. She starts setting everything on fire, and Shiki uses his silk to form a shield and catches the suitcase with Kabane's head. Shiki takes the head. Meanwhile, Kon is furious as she wanted to impress Inari, as she promised to never let her down again. So she starts attacking them with even more fireballs. While the boys are taking cover, Kabane tells Shiki to throw him at Kon, and he will end her off. After throwing the head, he managed to bite her in midair and defeats her within seconds. After she's gone, everything around the police station turns back to normal, without any flames, revealing that her powers are only an illusion. After, Kabane regenerates his whole body, which shocks Shiki and doesn't understand how Kabane is able to do the things he can do, even though they are meant to be the same kind, and is jealous of him. But he decides it's best if they become friends. After they head outside, they find Inugami waiting for them, and we discover that the stone that was stolen from Kabane was planted on him by Inugami, and is a shape-shifting stone, which Inugami reveals to Inari that the stone she's holding is actually fake, and the real one was still with the boy. Inugami scolds her for betraying him, leaving Inari extremely furious. Later on, they all arrive outside their office, but upon arriving, Kon the fox girl reappears, saying she needs Kabane's head, otherwise she has failed her mission for Inari, but due to her injury, she ends up fainting. Inugami takes her inside and then feeds Kon. Later on, Inugami is confronted by Kon, who still is requesting for Kabane's head, otherwise she can't return to her master Inari. So Inugami tricks her instead by transforming an orange fruit into Kabane's head, and after dismisses her. Shiki points out that when she finds out it's fake, she will be back with revenge, but Inugami doesn't think she's a problem. Meanwhile, Kabane receives a new job from Inugami, which is to head down to the river banks and investigate some deaths that have happened by supernatural entities near the sewers. Akira and Kabane arrive at the sewers, and Kabane asks Akira what his powers are. He told him he can turn water to ice, but he's terrible at forming his powers in stressful situations. Suddenly, both of them are attacked by a giant frog man, and it captures Akira, but Kabane manages to free him. Before the frog attacks again, a tanuki appears, who is Inugami's messenger, and gives them a letter along with a pouch and a container with blood. The message from Inugami states that the frogs are kimonos, who are the main culprits of the recent deaths happening in the city and have gone rogue against their race and have lost all their pride as a kimono. Inugami said that the blood that came with the letter is to attract the frog-like creatures, and he wants Kabane to draw them out and eliminate them all to keep the people of the city safe. Akira is scared upon hearing that they have to fight them, but he then remembers the reasons he came to Tokyo, which was to face his fears and become a stronger person, so he decides to stay and help Kabane. Akira releases the demon blood into the water, and the frogs come rushing towards them. Kabane fights with them alone, as Akira is having issues and has no courage at all. However, Kabane is really strong and has several moves to fend off the creatures, but then he gets overrun as there are too many of them. At that moment, Akira remembers how everyone treats him like he's a weakling and wants to change everyone's mind about him, and he suddenly releases a huge ice attack against the creatures, freezing them all and defeating every last one of them. Just a few days after, Kabane is cleaning the hallway, but is pulled into a mysterious room where we meet a guy called Mihai, who's been living in Inugami's office this whole time. He happens to specialize in IT and does everything behind the scenes. Inugami is upset they found him, as he's a ruthless vampire with supernatural powers. In the office, Mihai leaves his room for the first time in months and reveals that Kabane did in fact break his wrist after an arm wrestling match, and that's why he couldn't play his video games. So he decided to help with the investigation work instead. Later on, Mihai tricks and trapped Inugami in his room and sends the boys on a risky mission, where they would have to investigate a factory known for the employees who are randomly dying one by one. Until recently, it suddenly just stopped, and they need to find out why. Before they go in, Shiki decided to cover his whole body with his silk web, and managed to go invisible because his silk threads reflected the objects around it. Shiki gets inside the factory, and once inside, a toy car approaches him. It turns out that Mihai has a remote control car, which also turns invisible. He tells Shiki that the car will be his companion, and soon after, they discover all the employees were acting strangely in a room, all lined up and working like they were zombies. Suddenly, one of them decides to run away, but is found by the manager. He is then taken to a room where another woman transforms into a mosquito kimono and feasts on his brain, making him go back to work. But he's unable to use his brain, so he will work endlessly. Shiki is afraid of the mosquitoes and said he can't face all three of them. Mihai disagrees and wants to face them, so Shiki tries to get out of there. But Mihai uses the toy car to create a commotion, and the woman steps out and found the toy car. The one who found the car quickly hides it away and tells the others that there was nothing out here. But they seem to distrust the woman, and the leader wants to search the area. Then the mosquitoes use their kimono abilities to find the invisible Shiki. However, Mihai uses the car to electrocute it, saving Shiki's life. Shiki, however, can't move, and is now frozen in place, and Mihai realizes that Shiki must have gone through some traumatic incidents throughout his childhood and only puts on a front to seem like he's tough, but in reality he's always afraid. However, Shiki finally comes to his senses and uses his silk again to camouflage himself, and silks up the entire room, releasing different toxins into the air to confuse the kimono, learning how to trap it and knocks it out. At the same time, the other two boys appear to help Shiki, and Kabane is carrying the mosquito's sister and tells Shiki he easily defeated her. Soon the boss mosquito arrives. She feeds off the brains of the two sisters, appearing to be even stronger than before and knocking down Akira and Shiki. The only one remaining is Kabane, and after receiving advice from Mihai on how to use his kimono powers properly, he achieves great power and rips off the creature's arms. all of a sudden, Inari's new assistant, Nobamaru, appears, destroying the remains of what's left of the mosquitoes. He explains how he needs to do this so that the humans wouldn't find out about the kimono species. The next day, the group embarks on a road trip to find out more about Shiki's parents. Upon arriving there, the boys walk around the city until Kabane finds a book about a local legend of the town, which spoke of a man who came home one day and found a spider in his food. And even though he didn't have much himself, he decided to feed the spider and sharing his food with it. The next day when he woke up, the poor man's home was full of golden webs, which he then sold and became rich, living happily ever after. While looking at the book, we see a mysterious girl with pink hair staring at Shiki. Then Inugami comes along saying he found Shiki's uncle, so they all head into the forest, where the man tells them that the boy's father had died while his mother was pregnant with him, and then his father died from a disease when Shiki was only 5 years old. At night, while they were in the bathroom, Nobamaru arrives and invites them to explore the forest, to try to bring the group closer together as they were starting to feel separated from one another. However, while in the forest, Shiki starts to remember the times that his mother went into the forest to get to work, and told him to stay behind. He then follows the path she took and the others follow him, and are worried about where he's going. After, Shiki arrives at a hut, and at the same time, remembers his mother going into the same hut, and has a flashback of the time he followed her one night and saw something horrifying when opening the door. His mother was breeding with a large demon Kamino, and some sort of experiment going on, which is why Shiki has been traumatized all this time while growing up. Inugami takes Shiki's uncle into the forest to talk with him, and without much pressure at all, the man revealed to him that he participated in the experiments on Shiki's mother using several kimono creatures until a kimono was born with the mutation of producing the golden silk. He found out that the golden silk was capable of restoring human cells and that he would make a fortune off of it. But the man didn't realize that Shiki had heard everything his uncle said on a phone call, and Shiki appears out of the darkness trapping his uncle in a tree, and is ready to finish him off. However, at that moment, a giant Kamino appears and tries to eat Akira, but then bites Inugami's hand, which is now poisoned. And the group is surrounded by swarms of Kamuno creatures, so they end up separating. While the creatures corner them in, Shiki's uncle explains how these are Shiki's brothers and sisters as a result of the experiments that they done. Soon after, all the creatures begin to speak with the voice of his mother, and that makes the boy collapse. Back with Inugami, the mysterious young woman appears named Aya and calms down the angry Kaminos after she leads the pair of them to the lake, which heals Inugami's arm. Meanwhile, Shiki continues to be heartbroken when hearing his mother's voice from all the demons, and is sad about what his uncle has done to his family, thus making him weak and unable to find the strength to fight. So he orders Kabane to kill them all for him. We then see Kabane transform and begins to fight against all the monsters, and with the help of Nobamaru, he defeats the creatures, also including a giant kimono. After that, the fight ends and Kabane throws Akio down and asks Shiki if they should finish him. But Shiki said that even if they were to kill him, this still wouldn't bring his family back, and decides not to do it. Suddenly, Aya arrives to the scene and asks Akio, her father, where he hid the cocoon that she had made. Apparently, the cocoon is being used to produce the golden silk. So Inugami decides to call Mihai, and with the data he's collected over the past year from investigating Akio, he can conclude the 4 places that Akio visits the most. After, Mihai reveals the spots to Inugami, and Aya then realizes where the cocoon must be. The girl then rushes over there, but soon after, Shiki catches up and said he will be the one to retrieve the cocoon. He then dives into the water and finds out his mother is still alive. He brings her to the surface, and at that moment it is revealed that the mother was the golden web all this time. So they rescue her, and Inugami brings everyone back to his place in Tokyo. He tells Shiki that he knows a place where he can help his mother back in the city. Shiki is fine with leaving his uncle alive, as he concluded that destroying his legacy was worse than death. However, when they leave, Nobamaru reappears and finishes him off. Later on, we see Aya is afraid that her brother Shiki would hate her, but the boy said that if it wasn't for her surviving the experiments of her father, their mother would not be alive today. Then the mother wakes up, happy to see her children are alive and safe. At this moment, his sister Aya is also joining them on the next mission and becomes a member of the investigation team. It turns out Aya has fallen in love with Kabane and asks him out. Right then, Kon appears wanting to fight her and is jealous upon seeing the two of them together. After, Inugami explains that the next job would be to face an invisible Kamino that was ripping off parts of random women's faces, as she wanted to become the most beautiful woman in the town. Once they arrive, the fox girl is saddened by the attention the boy was giving to the Aya and stays behind, where she starts to hear a voice asking to help her. Then an invisible force pulls Aya's hair, and so Kabane punches the air to save her. After, a Kamino appears named Katanashi, who reveals she's been ripping off certain parts of girls' faces to become the most beautiful girl in order to conquer a boy's heart who worked in the nearby store. Suddenly Khan ends up losing control and attacks Aya, however Kabane defends her, and so Khan runs back to the office crying. Back at the office, Inugami is informed that the task had been solved when Aya managed to form a human body for Katanashi, so she promised she wouldn't attack anyone else ever again. At night, Kabane searches for Khan at the forest and comforts her. On the other side, Inugami accompanies Kuni, where she secretly was honoring her other deceased kimono children. Later on, we are introduced to Yuri, the twin brother of Akira, who in his thoughts remembered the times from when they were both born, and all their needs were taken care of by the women of the village. It's a rare thing for kimonos to be born as twins, as this only occurs every 100 years, so the mother always was strict and kept them indoors, and they never got to see their father who was locked in a hut outside. But as long as they had each other's backs, the two of them were unstoppable. Back at the office, Akira seems to always mess up by accident and normally ruins the mission they had planned. But due to her always messing up, she ended up irritating the others, causing Akira to run away. When Akira leaves, she ends up meeting her lost brother, as Yuri was also searching for Akira and he knew she would most likely be at Inugami's place. Both of them walk away from civilization, and Akira gets tired, so as she wishes to sleep, Yui decides to build her a huge ice castle to spend the night in. Impressed by the structure he built, he tries taking a picture to post on social media. However, her brother destroys the cell phone and then locks the castle. Inugami sees the news on TV about a huge ice castle. Upon getting there, they find several onlookers, until Yui comes outside, and when he was about to attack them, he receives a shot from Inugami, making the crowd run away. At that time, he reveals a stone similar to a Kabane's life stone in his chest, and the detective explains that this is not called a life stone as his is known as a null stone. Whoever possesses it can reach the full kimono potential, and it can destroy and rebuild lands. Akira finally leaves the room, but when she goes downstairs, she sees Yui has frozen all her friends, and thinks they're all dead. Meanwhile, Inari and Nabamaru are waiting outside, and plan on taking Yui's null stone. Yui has a flashback from when he and Akira were younger, and Yui was named the head of the ice village. Yui has been through various traumas, while Akira was always just the innocent one. Meanwhile, Kabane manages to free himself as he produces more body heat. After freeing himself, he said that he had to find a way to defeat Yui, but Akira, in the intentions of preventing a fight happening between his brother and friends, pretends that it was his plan from the beginning, and said she hates Kabane and loves her brother and wants to live with him. And as soon as his brother returns, he leaves with him willingly, leaving his friends behind. After that, Inari appears in the castle, ordering Kabane to help her steal the null stone, and said to Kabane that the artifact could be intertwined with his parents. He agrees to helping her and said that if she's lying about his parents just to get the stone, he will deal with her in a different way. Before leaving, he said he needs to wait until his friends are unfrozen. But Inugami can talk using the bear and expresses his messages through brain waves and heart frequency. He tells Kabane that the two of them are fine and to go and find his parents and retrieve the null stone from Yui. Meanwhile, Yui and Akira are in the forest and suddenly Nabamaru appears and fights with Yui and commands him to hand over the null stone for Inari. A fight breaks out between the two, and while fighting, Akira calls out to Yui, making him distracted, and Nabamaru was able to touch the stone. However, his hand is now frozen to the bones and shatters, something he didn't expect would happen. While trying to figure out how to take the null stone, Yui comes after him. But suddenly, Kabane quickly defends him and the two of them devise a plan on how to beat Yui. Nabamaru sets Kabane on fire, and Kabane is told to use his regeneration power to constantly heal up, and that way they can defeat Yui's ice with their fire power. After seeing Kabane as an overpowered fireball, Yui covers his body with ice armor. Meanwhile, Akira is still stuck in the ice cage and comes to realize that the fog in the air is just water, so he can build up a huge ball of ice to free himself. Meanwhile, both Kabane and Yui are fighting continuously, but Nabamaru notes that if the flames overpower his regeneration skill, then his body will collapse. He told Kabane that he has to do 3 special hits against Yui to defeat him. He then uses his entire strength to produce the 3 simultaneous hits, and during his final hit, Akira quickly jumps in to save Yui. After, she explains that the stone is feeding off of his energy and is also protecting Akira this whole time. However, she then rips the stone out of his body so he can live, which gives her all of Yui's memories. At that moment, Kabane's body regenerates and he helps Akira revive her brother by merging his life stone with the null stone. After the stone falls to the ground, and Inari takes this opportunity to steal the stone. However, Inugami arrives just in time and demands her to give it back, as the artifact never belonged to her. At the hospital, Kabane asks Yui about the null and life stones, but Inugami interferes and explains that thousands of years ago there was a war between kimono and humans, which devastated the lands for centuries. During that time, the stones were formed and used by only the greatest kimono, known as chiefs or higher-ups in the kimono race. Kabane is surprised, and then the two of them embark on a journey to find Kabane's parents.